Today's program is brought to you by pennystockprofessor.com. For all the best OTCBB stock picks, sign up at pennystockprofessor.com.
Thank you for tuning in to another TBC Daily News Update. I'm Brandon Vincent.
And I'm Angelina Soriano. In international news today, John Travolta has flown a jetliner carrying relief supplies into the Haitian capital, along with doctors and ministers from the Church of Scientology. The 55-year-old actor piloted his own Boeing 707 from Florida with 6 tons of ready-to-eat military rations and medical supplies for survivors of Haiti's devastating January 12th earthquake. Travolta compared the mission to aid efforts following Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. He said, "We were there right away with this airplane because as we have the ability and the means to do this, so I think you have a responsibility on some level to do that." Aid groups have been desperate to fly their own planes into the overstressed airport. UN humanitarian spokeswoman Elizabeth Byers said that at least 800 planes with relief items are on a waiting list for the airport, which can handle only about 130 flights a day due to lack of space to park planes as they unload. The aid group Doctors Without Borders has complained that the flight scheduling priorities of U.S. military controllers running the airport delayed the arrival of field hospitals, resulting in some deaths. More than 150,000 people have already been buried since the magnitude 7 quake, which destroyed entire Port-au-Prince neighborhoods and landmarks and crumbled nearby towns.
In today's U.S. news, when President Barack Obama asked New York Senator Hillary Clinton to join his cabinet as Secretary of State, the move was widely praised. Clinton was his principal rival for the 2008 Democratic presidential nomination. At the time, comparisons were made to Abraham Lincoln. Historian Doris Goodwin recounts in her book, Team of Rivals, how the 16th President of the United States invited others who held leadership claims on the new Republican Party into his cabinet in an effort to present a united front. But Lincoln's decision to invite his rivals for the 1860 Republican nomination into his administration was also a matter of political preservation. Their inclusion in the cabinet kept them inside the tent looking out rather than outside the tent looking in, forcing an alliance with Lincoln as the Union threatened to come apart. Clinton is not, unsurprisingly, speaking publicly about her intentions beyond saying, as she told PBS's Travis Smiley in an interview, that she is absolutely not interested in running again for President of the United States. But in the same interview, Clinton also allows that her current job is a difficult and time-consuming one, and that while she is honored to have it, she cannot see herself serving in the same post in a second Obama administration. The ongoing decline in the president's approval ratings has been more than a few Democrats concerned. The Democratic defeats in the Virginia and New Jersey uber-national elections and the Massachusetts Senate race have a number of them running scared. In much of the same way that the party's poor performance in 1978 helped propel Senator Edward Kennedy forward to challenge incumbent President Jimmy Carter in 1980. The chatter has increased in recent days about Clinton leaving the cabinet sometime in the first term, likely over some matter of principle, so that she can position herself to challenge Obama in 2012. Perhaps it's just wishful thinking on the part of those Democrats who have already grown tired of Obama. What is true is that Clinton can still mobilize the political infrastructure necessary to mount an effective challenge to the sitting president. A primary challenge against an incumbent who is below 50% are two very different things, a fact of which the Clinton political team is surely aware.
In health news, the debate over cognitive traditional mental health therapy psychologists who favor the more medical-minded cognitive behavioral model point to growing evidence. Proponents of psychoanalysis deride a one-size-fits-all approach. In a November report that's attracting controversy the way couches attract loose change, 3 professors charge that many mental health practitioners are using unproved methods and that many clinical psychology training programs lack scientific rigor. The accusation has reignited a long-standing war within the psychological profession. On the one side, it's the report's authors and other like-minded psychologists who say that too many clinicians favor personal experience over scientific evidence when deciding on a patient's treatment. They are particularly unsettled by the number of therapists, especially from training programs that grant a higher degree known as Doctor of Psychology or PsyD, who ignore the most studied type of treatment, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. On the other side of the fight are psychologists who say that what matters most is not the type but the quality of mental health treatment, and who fear that the push toward cognitive behavioral therapy, which is cheaper but not effective for everyone, is being used by insurance companies to cut down on cost. The debate comes at a critical moment in mental health care. In the last 20 years, the treatment rate for people with mental disorders have nearly doubled. In October, a long-term Duke University study reported that some afflictions, including depression and anxiety disorder, affect twice as many as previously believed. The situation stands to worsen. The National Alliance on Mental Illness recently found that the unemployed were 4 times as likely as job holders to report symptoms of mental illness. A need for clinicians capable of treating post-traumatic stress disorder will rise dramatically as more soldiers return from Iraq and Afghanistan.
In today's tech news, scientists are developing mind-to-machine technology that could enable people who cannot speak to communicate using their own brainwaves and a computer screen. Recently, neuroscientists at the Mayo Clinic campus in Jacksonville, Florida, demonstrated that brainwaves can project letters onto a monitor, focusing on a matrix of letters. For example, by concentrating on the letter Q, that Q would appear on the screen. The technique requires a craniotomy. That is a surgical incision into the skull. They do this so that doctors can place electrodes directly onto the surface of the brain. The implanted devices then record electrical activity produced by the firing of nerve cells. The research can potentially help millions of people with disorders that result in speech loss, such as Lou Gehrig's disease, where a progressive deterioration of voluntary muscle movement and spinal cord injuries, and locked-in syndrome, where patients are awake and aware but paralyzed can now use more than their eyes to communicate. Even certain stroke patients could benefit. While researchers have used the technology in the past to see whether such signals could control prosthetic devices like an arm or a leg, but it is believed now that the first research that examines its potential for language. The researchers studied the techniques in epilepsy patients with existing electrodes that had been implanted earlier to monitor their seizures. The scientists wanted to see whether the process was more effective when electrodes were implanted directly onto the surface of the brain as compared with those placed on the scalp. In the study, patients sat in front of a monitor that was hooked up to a computer running the researcher software, which was designed to interpret electrical signals coming from the electrodes. The patient looked at the screen, which contained a 6x6 matrix with a single letter displayed. Each time the square with a certain letter flashed and the patient focused on it, the computer recorded the brain's response to the flashing letter. Then the patients focused on a specific letter and the computer software recorded the information. The computer then calibrated the system with the individual patient's specific brainwave, and when the patient focused on a letter, the letter appeared on the screen.
And now for today's entertainment. Kiefer Sutherland is caught up in an alleged cattle selling scam. Kiefer Sutherland has been kicked with $869,000 in an alleged cattle investment operation gone awry. That's a decent-sized dent even for a guy who's finishing out a 3-year contract on the hit show 24. Through a financial advisor, Sutherland became involved with suspect Michael Wayne Carr, who allegedly promised to buy cattle in Mexico and resell them in the U.S. for a profit. Though the money was transferred, there is no evidence any cattle buying or selling took place. A New Mexico couple lost their $177,000 investment. A Colorado cattle mover lost $400,000 worth of livestock that had been in Carr's care. And a man from Escalon, California came forward to say that he'd loaned 54 cattle to Carr, but had yet to get them back or get paid for them. Carr, a cattle manager and competitive steer roping promoter, is expected to be arraigned February 8th on 12 felony charges, among them multiple counts of grand theft, forgery, embezzlement, obtaining money by false pretenses, and falsifying corporate books.
In today's green news, a new green coal company has named itself after the Lorax without permission. Simply branding something clean coal is far from making it actually clean. Now a new startup coal company is attempting to pull off a double whammy. It's both calling itself a green coal company and naming itself Lorax AG after Dr. Seuss's beloved environmental children's book. The move reeks of desperation and made worse by the fact that the company didn't bother to get permission to use the name. Dr. Seuss would likely turn in his grave if he heard the account offered by the company's founder on the rationale of using his iconic character's namesake. The Lorax is the protector of the truffula trees, so it's not only a gross case of greenwashing, but a copyright infringement.
Thank you for tuning in to another TBC Daily News Update. I'm Brandon Vincent.
And I'm Angelina Soriano.